Hello, and welcome again to Talk About. For our first rather serious topic of conversation, we will be discussing today as a jumping off point, the Harvey Weinstein situation and what that spiraled into. But on the whole, we're kind of discussing, I guess, one, the environment that kind of created this stuff in the first place, its place kind of in film and in the entertainment industry, and how I think in a lot of ways media has been able to desensitize people to it by how they portray it, stuff of that nature. And so I have Rachel here, who, as a woman who is pursuing acting and has been in the field for a little bit, has a little bit of experience.
Yeah, a little.
Dealing with it.
And just being a woman in general.
Yeah, just in general.
Yeah.
We will talk about in general, with just a bit of more focus on the entertainment industry. But I think to start off, I'd like you to kind of give the rundown of not just like Harvey Weinstein levels of awfulness, but like just the minor things you see in that, in any sort of situation. Yeah.
Well, I feel like, in Austin, and my experiences in Austin have been in general more respectful. I don't think it's as extreme here. We're lucky in that way. But yeah, just like maybe a lack of respect sometimes of female actors' comfort levels, or like in scenes and things like that, and feeling like people talking about you like you're not there, and things like that, and like less respect for your opinion, and just people making assumptions about you because you're an female actor, or whatever, and things like that. But or just you say these are my boundaries, and maybe a director will be like, okay, but what about this? And I'm like, that's outside the boundary I literally just defined for you. Like, come on. Yeah. So, things like that, trying to push. But in general, like, especially in, like, dealing with directors and other people in the film industry here, off camera and just one-on-one, they usually, very respectful, and we're lucky here. But I do have like a little experience with like the LA scene and that kind of thing. And it is different there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've heard a number of stories, not just in the entertainment field, but just in general. For a while, I was a pizza delivery driver, and one of our other drivers, she was one of the few female drivers, and I can think of the number of times she delivered to, say, a bachelor party or something, where they tried to keep her there and get her to stay. And like, one of our managers had to almost invest in a rape whistle. Like, we was at that level.
Yeah.
And so while Austin may be better in some regards, I think as soon as you step out of Austin, it does change.
Right, and I think that's just like the environment in general for women. Like, I drove for Lyft for a little while, and I had a couple experiences. Like, once I dropped two guys off at their apartment after a night out, and they were trying to convince me to come in and smoke some weed with them or whatever, and I was like, no thank you, like, I'm not gonna wander into a stranger's apartment with two guys I don't know, no thank you. Oh, come on, like, we're not gonna hurt you. I'm like, I would be an idiot to go on with you. And then like another guy just saying like, oh, you're a female Uber driver, like, do you carry a weapon? I promise, like, I won't look for it, but just tell me what kind of weapon you have in here. And I'm like, I'm not gonna tell you anything. I was like, I don't carry a weapon, but I'm not gonna tell him that because he was making me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And just things like that, like be aware that he was saying like, I could easily overpower you, and I'm like, why would you say that to me? Even if you had no malintent, just saying that makes me feel extremely uncomfortable, and it's like completely over his head. Like he didn't realize what he was doing.
I think as a rule of thumb, yes, you can be aware of the situation the other person's in. You don't have to address it.
Right.
You really don't, because if you are aware of the situation they are probably acutely aware of it too, and probably don't need you bringing it up in the middle of their job when they're already trying to make themselves calm down and feel as safe as they can.
Mm-hmm.
Also, there's that weird twist of like, well, if I acknowledge it and like seem like I'm being understanding, then maybe I can kind of twist it, and like that feels a little even more like manipulative and just seedy. I don't know if you saw the recent Aziz Ansari stuff.
Yeah.
There is kind of this thing of using, if you know there's the backlash, like, I guess it's sort of if I patron for the other side and like try and be helpful, then I can get stuff out of it. It's like that, you can really just destroy the purpose of it.
Yeah.
And in many ways, corrupt the very thing that you should be trying to help. But
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in Austin, at least my experience with them in the film industry, I think partially because the people I work with, they're not famous and they're not powerful directors for the most part. I think the issue is often an abuse of power. And in Austin, they don't really have that power to abuse quite so much, and I think that's why it's a little better here. But yeah, that's not always the case.
Yeah, it is. There is definitely a correlation between the amount of power someone has, seemingly over another person. But at the end of the day, you can be a powerful director and threaten someone to ruin someone's career. That does not mean you actually have power over them. Like, you are not truly in control of anything. You're just, you're really just, manipulating a situation, and again, you're forcing someone to do something.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, speaking as an actress who I really, this is my goal. I want to be able to make a good living doing what I love, and I've worked with people who have the power to influence my career before, and it's a really tricky situation. I worked for some connected people who never asked, were never like abused their power in this kind of way of like, sexual misconduct or anything like that. But, just like maybe, abusing me, not paying me as much as I deserved, or making me run all kinds of crazy errands, and I always would feel hesitant to speak up because I didn't want to rub them the wrong way, because they had potential power over my future if they decided that they didn't want to help me progress. And this was before I was acting. This was when I was working in the film industry. They could make it even harder for me. It's already hard enough, so it's a tricky situation.
I think there are a lot of root issues at hand in this, in terms of, because the thing I always think about is it just the upbringing of the person involved as to why they feel that way? I feel like there's more to it than that. And one of the things I realized is that, we've had all these cases come out, like Kevin Spacey, Harvey Weinstein, a lot of these cases, and if you look at the films that we've had up to this point, you kind of realize maybe one of the reasons we've become so desensitized is the very people doing these crimes are the ones making our media. In a lot of ways, if they make a movie, look at like Woody Allen. Look at how many of his movies, and now we can look at him with a lens because we have enough time since to kind of realize the creepy and kind of awful stuff he did. But at the time, if that was considered what the popular movie was, you'd see it and it would make you think that's normal. And so part of the problem is we need to realize that the people who, like, if you see it in a movie, know who that director is, know who that writer is, know where they're coming from, because the more we understand who's giving us this media, the more we can keep ourselves from being kind of blindfolded to a lot of these problems.
Yeah, totally. They control what we see. Like Harvey Weinstein, the most powerful producer in Hollywood, like he has so much control over what we as the audience would see, and and he has no problem with all this bad stuff, you know, and he would encourage it in many situations. And so it's like, you become desensitized, it's normalized. So that's so true. Like, the media has so much control over what we see day to day, and the media is run by a lot of these people who perpetrate these offenses. So
there's a reason a lot of times in countries where there's a dictator, one of the first things they'll take a hold of is the news, the media, the information that you receive.
Yeah.
You can filter it and control it and hide a lot of awful stuff in it. And I think it's not just on that regard. A couple of other cases, Kevin Spacey we've mentioned, but his case was more with young male actors in that regard. But also like Bryan Singer. I don't know if you remember when stuff came out with Bryan Singer. Basically a similar but worse situation to Kevin Spacey. Mm-hmm. And this was before all the stuff with Harvey Weinstein. Only now is it really starting to have an effect, but it came out and it was talked about, people were outraged, and then it just kind of faded.
Yeah.
You know, it's come out with Harvey Weinstein having clauses in contracts where to basically make it where to ensure if he does something and has to actually like get reprimanded by anybody, then he has to pay up the company. And there's this notion of like that's clearly not an incentive to make him stop. It's just an incentive to make money off of someone else being awful.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of inherent of a lot of the issue in a lot of American businesses. How do we exploit the issues we have to make more money? Mm-hmm. Like, instead of trying to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
But, since this will probably be released around the time of our first sketch, one of the things I want to talk about is romance movies in general, because romance movies kind of do it the same way that some of the other ones do, but in a way you don't realize. A lot of romance movies have things, like there's the iconic scene of having the boombox outside of the girl's window, like mm-hmm. these, or like The Notebook, like a lot of these things have, what, if you just changed the lighting a little bit, change the music, you would be like, that is a stalker, that's a creepy, horrifying thing.
Yeah.
And the fact is, some of the first filmmakers were magicians, illusionists. Mm-hmm. Film is magic, there's a reason they call it that, and there's magic is can like divert you from other things, make you feel certain ways, and like we do manipulate through a camera lens what you're seeing and make you feel certain ways. And even if you don't realize it, you can exploit that in ways like with romance movies where you teach people that that's how it should be, mm-hmm. that that's what love is, that's what these beautiful moments are, and that kind of completely destroys any chance of. Like, you see that same scene in another movie, but you're like, oh, in this one, the music's sad and bad. So clearly, because she's not supposed to like him, it's wrong.
Right.
Like, it's not.
Yeah, like, I think of men complain about rom-coms because it sets the expectations so high. Women think, oh, men need to buy me flowers every day and woo me and run to the airport. You know, women, it's like, oh, a woman thinks that you get in a fight and she leaves, the man has to chase after her, you know, like, men complain about it in that way, and it really just, you know, and then women complain equally of like, it gives us, you know, expectations that real men don't do that stuff, and sometimes that's good, like, I don't want someone to stand outside my window, that's creepy, but then it's like, oh man, you know, that'd be nice, my boyfriend bought me flowers more often, you know, that kind of thing, but it's like, it's not real life. And that's, you know, the movies are often not real life, you know, even true stories, things are, you know, exaggerated to make it more dramatic, more engaging, and so it's an interesting point of like, it really is an illusion, it's not real, but people take it at face value and try and apply it to their own lives.
I think with a lot of this stuff, there's this weird sense of, if anyone's ever seen any sort of comedy show in the past like couple decades, you've heard Harvey Weinstein jokes. Comedy's been making jabs at it and knowing it's there for a long time.
Yeah.
but nothing was ever done in comedy. And it's the interesting thing that I'm just kind of realizing, like, often we have, like, these movies that are satirical and comedic that are also purposely talking about certain issues, and using comedy because it's the only way someone will listen, but even then, they'll still not do anything about it because it's funny.
Yeah.
So, but when you show it dramatically, if we had a movie that was like, say, The Notebook, but talking about, like, hey, this guy is kind of really being aggressive here, and is saying maybe you should do something about it. First, we purposely kind of shove those movies away, and we don't want to talk about it. We don't mind films with glorified violence. We don't mind films with excessive scenes. We don't have movies like, we make a movie like American Beauty or Lolita, like, big deals. But the second it becomes shown as a real issue, we kind of feel like we have to push it away. And I think there's an inherent issue in that as well, where we feel like once it's, as long as we don't consider it a problem, it won't be a problem.
Well, I mean, movies are escapism, and people go to the movies to escape all the shit that's happening in the real world, because there's always so much shit, you know, and the new, you're bombarded with the news all the time, and sometimes, you know, I feel like when I go to the movies or when I sit down to watch TV, I just look for the most lighthearted thing I can find, the most far from reality, because it's like I just need a break. So I can see, you know, why people avoid it when it comes to movies and that kind of thing. But it's such a powerful medium, and it really does have the power to affect change and bring people's attention to real issues. And so, you know, making light of things and that kind of thing is a slippery slope with comedy. Like, people, if you laugh at, you know, like, yes, it helps people pay attention to something they might not have originally paid attention to, but it also makes them laugh at it.
Yeah.
And not take it as seriously. And so that's a slippery slope. And then, and people definitely have that, you know, that you mentioned, that mindset of, like, if I just ignore it, it's not real. It'll go away. And that is the opposite. If you ignore these problems with Harvey Weinstein, and this has been the culture in Hollywood from day one. And, you know, people are, if I ignore it, it won't be a part of my reality. It's a way to protect yourself. And because that's been the way people have handled it, more and more and more people have been getting hurt, you know, and so you have to address it and tackle it head on, as uncomfortable as it is.
Yeah, well, like you say, it is escapism, and it is fine to be like, I don't want to watch this because I want something lighthearted. But there's this weird thing where people, they get to that point, but then they're like, but that means this must be dismissed. It's not real. Like, I don't want to watch 12 Years a Slave because it's such a hard movie to watch. So there's no issues there. Like, no, you can not want to see something and not see those issues. Take someone who, like, they can't watch those movies because it will give them flashbacks to something. They still acknowledge that is an issue. It's an issue enough to make them have flashbacks to something. So as, like, a modern populace, like, you need to kind of realize, just because I can't handle watching this right now doesn't mean I should ignore the fact that it exists and that it's being talked about. That means there's an issue. And
I think it is important to force yourself to watch movies like that sometimes, because part of being a good person and part of being someone, you just understanding other people's experiences. Not, you know, I can never understand the experience of a person who's different than me because I only know my own experience. But media and movies are especially made by those people who have those different experiences, can offer me, I can never know what it feels like, but I can see what other people have gone through, and it can expand my understanding of other groups of people that are different than me and allow me to have more compassion as a human being, and that's really important.
Yeah, and you know, we've been talking about this, and a lot of this has been Hollywood and things like that. But this issue does kind of go on a global scale in the sense that, I don't know how many foreign movies you watch, but it is one of the things we talked about in these more lighthearted topics before is that, like, a foreign voice can give a different outlook on similar topics. And that can be the case here too. off the top of my head, I've seen a lot of foreign films, but none of them, like, there might be a hard to watch scene, there might be a scene of violence or rape or any such thing, but it's never, one, it's not near as prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
The key ones I can think of, too, is usually there, it's one and done, it's quick, and it does serve a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that's not always the case. I know there are some issues in Bollywood that are kind of very similar to Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of exploitation and stuff like that. But that is something to be aware of, is because I think one of the big things, as with our last topic, is kind of like helping people who are trying to write their own stories. And I think a big thing we need to address pretty hard here is, since we talk about these people abusing power, if you are someone who wants to make a story, wants to make a film or something like that, one of the first things you need to look at in your script is, like, you cut out the stuff that's not necessary. One of the key things that might not be necessary is, say, nudity or a rape scene. Or even a sex scene. Is it needed? Does it need to be there? If the person you get who's great in the role can do everything else perfect but doesn't feel comfortable doing that scene, do you need the scene?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people say, oh no, it needs to be there for the story, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
The story would be fine without it. If you feel that attached to a scene with nudity or any of those kind of things, then you're not really attached to the story at that point. You're attached to that aspect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think directors are often not just trying to tell a story, but trying to evoke something from people, really make people have maybe a strong reaction to something. That's part of what they're trying to do. Like, I think if, the directors who do those extreme things, they're really trying to get a reaction out of people. And I think sometimes maybe that's why they're so tied to those scenes, is because that gets a reaction from people.
Yeah.
And yeah. Makes, like having a rape scene, it's like, is that necessary? Does it, to the story, does it normalize sexual assault, or does it make people feel uncomfortable and horrified and maybe like bring their reaction to like, oh shit, this goes on, like this is bad, this makes, like, I can't ignore it, it's in my face, so I don't know.
But on the counter side of that, when you have it where it is drawn out and it's horrifying, like, take some of the old exploitation films like I Spit on Your Grave. At that point, I think one of the better, not perfect ways of seeing it is Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. It had two scenes, one of which was less necessary than the other, I think. But there is a kind of window of, if you really need to show it and you want it to show that it's a bad thing, how long? Mm-hmm. You can show it for a little bit and imply something. You can imply a lot more than you actually need to show.
Yeah.
Movies are show not tell. But, so yeah, movies are show not tell. But you can show a lot of information with a single scene than with a long, drawn-out plot. You can imply a whole backstory from something in the background of a scene.
Right.
So there is that level of, like, you don't need to go that far, because after a while, it becomes this big, if it's a 5-minute scene of some horrible action happening, it goes from being, oh, this is a real thing, to just the fact that it's horrifying, to the point where you kind of feel like it's so horrifying, this is clearly over the top and not able to actually happen.
You maybe, like, as a self-defense mechanism, start to tune it out.
Yeah.
It's like, stop paying attention. Yeah. And you also have to think of the actors who are in those scenes. It takes a lot out of you to film a scene like that, to put yourself in the position, for the men, to put yourself in the position of someone doing that violent act. To, as the woman, being in the position of being the victim of a violent act. Like, the really good actors, they put themselves in that head, like, they experience it in, like, sometimes near real reality almost, and then they do it over and over again, take 1, take 10, from different angles, and it's like, what are you putting this person through?
Yeah, there's the emotional trauma on both sides, and also the fact that we wonder why some actors would think this is okay, and then you have them play these scenes and be this role and be like, all right, that was a great take, you did great in that horrifying scene, and it is this weird kind of thing of how do you address that.
Mm-hmm.
On another kind of example, period pieces like Since I mentioned 12 Years a Slave, where you have these white actors having to say these things, and there is kind of this weird point of like, how do you, like, at what point does it stop working for the film? And I think a lot of people's argument to that is Tarantino's usually where you stop, like maybe dial it back a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think one of the elements of our film history that really kind of set the stage for a lot of this is the exploitation genre. They were filled with a lot of these things, with movies like I Spit in Your Grave. The original Last House on the Left, as good a movie as it is, it did set this precedent, and those movies had a boom, but they were the independent movies, and they were supposed to be raw and dark. But then you gloss them into the mainstream in Hollywood, and you put that gloss over it, and it kind of does break down the grime and the realism and make it just kind of... There's something uncomfortable about having a pretty-looking rape scene.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that in and of itself is disgusting even to, like, say.
Yeah.
Like, it feels weird to say it.
Right.
But that's what a lot of times, if it's in a big budget movie, you have the set lights and the lighting and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's why I feel like maybe find a better way to tell it.
Yeah. It's an interesting point. It's a very complicated issue because it's like there's so many sides to it. Because, you know, I support the idea that people should be able to create whatever, you know, they feel and want to create, but there's also a responsibility of how your work will affect people and how your work will be interpreted. And, you know, there's such a fine line between people. Sometimes people don't understand that they can just take it as it's just a movie, or like this is a real issue, you know, like how people will take your work. It's very complicated.
It's very complicated also in the fact that people kind of forget film has been media has been around since the early 1900s. These issues have been around since even longer.
Oh yeah.
These are problems that have persisted and morphed and changed, and like a virus, they like adapt to any new kind of pushback.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does become kind of this thing of like, one, where do you start? Like, what is the starting point that will actually cause change and maybe get to the other ones? Because you have to worry if you pick one and yes, you fix it, you get that problem sorted out, but it doesn't affect any of the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the route that will get to the root and help spread out? And I think part of that is an attack on all fronts, really.
Mm-hmm.
There is kind of this... We have all this stuff now with all these people coming out. And it's in different situations, different stuff, different ways of handling it. I may have issues with Ridley Scott casting an all-white cast for Gods of Egypt, but I can at least respect them taking Kevin Spacey out and refilming most of their movie right before it was supposed to come out. And I think that heavy change should and hopefully will denote a shift in the landscape of Hollywood and who is telling these stories. And for people who don't care about these issues at all, maybe at least look at the fact that you'll finally get to see something different.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen the same thing for so long from the same kind of people and the same minds. There is now room to see something new, see something genuinely different. And personally, I think, or hope for the better, maybe we can see these movies, these stories told in a way where it actually addresses issues instead of creating issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Because the people who have been telling these stories, the rape scenes and the sex scenes and the stuff that have been in general, the white, powerful men in charge. But if women start telling those stories, if people of color start telling those stories, they will tell them in a different way that might affect people in a different way. And yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and I think that is kind of the final main point, is kind of to end on a lighter note and a look to the future and a hope that happens, and I hope that by talking about it, even here on this little video, helps anyone kind of, one, feel like they can speak up, because that's the hardest part, is feeling like you can speak up, especially, as we just mentioned, these people have been telling stories for years, they've had all this power and everything, and people are like, well, why didn't they speak up sooner? Would you have spoken out against Hitler if you knew your whole family would be murdered? It becomes this question of like, you cannot blame someone for just trying to survive.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's a matter of support. You know, I think all of these women couldn't speak out before because their careers could be over. The women have been afraid to speak out against the violence that's been committed against them for so long, because the first question you get asked is like, oh, what was your relation to the guy? What were you wearing? You know, like victim blaming, and they don't believe you, and just the support. Now it's women are rallying behind each other, which is important, and saying like, speak, you know. Now it's like, with all these women coming forward, it's not only more of a safe space to come forward yourself, but you feel encouraged to do so because you're not just speaking up for yourself. You're speaking up for all women, and you realize that, and you're adding your voice to, you know, this chorus of women saying, me too. Like, I don't know a single woman who hasn't at least been harassed on some level, you know? It happens to everyone. If we scream in a chorus like me too, that's what's so powerful about it, is making people aware it happens to all women on some level, and the media is a whole separate issue sometimes, but it's like reflective of what goes on everywhere, and banding together. This is, I think, the first time we've been able to band together on such a widespread scale, and you know, it's almost pressured men to get involved, and that's crucial, is having men get involved, because, you know, as many strides as women are making, men still are in the majority of power positions, and so having men support us is very important. And so more men, you know, it's like the trend now, right? And we just got to keep it trendy to support women's and women's rights, but it just keep it. I think the most important thing is to keep it a safe space for women to be able to come forward, because that's it. We've been silenced for so long, and it's still a brave thing to speak about what happened to you, and it always will be, but we want to make it more like safe, just like it's okay to speak. It won't ruin your life. People won't turn their backs on you for something that was not even in your control, things like that. So just to keep the conversation going. Don't let it fall to the background like it has so many times. You know, it's not a joke. Like, you know, we're not going to laugh it off. And I think women are finally like, nope. Oh, don't forget about me. I'm still here. Nope. So. Yeah,
and one, whether you're the first voice or the thousandth voice, like, your voice is still valid, and you still are part of something there. And as you mentioned with men getting involved, one, part of the reason you should get involved is, one, to support people that you should care about. You have friends, you have sisters, you have girlfriends, like, you have women in your life that you care about, assumedly. You should want them to be safe. You should want anyone they know to be safe. You should want that safety there, just like you feel most of the time in your life. Two, when you don't speak up, even if you feel that it is wrong, you help create, like, we should all stand together, but when you don't speak up, you create more of a divide. And three, maybe evaluate and realize that you yourself might have had these things, but didn't even think it was possible because you're a guy. I know I have. We have Terry Crews coming out, going at it so aggressively to like really put it out there that this happens. And one of the key things with Terry Crews is he's not starting this with "it happens to men too." It's just "it happened to me," and just adding his voice in there, and that's a big step as well.
Yeah, I think it's almost like the 1,000th voice, the 10,000th voice, is just as important as that first voice, because it keeps the conversation going, and it really lets people know how pervasive this problem is. And like you said, people, even if it hasn't happened to you, it's happened to someone you love. And if it hasn't, if the culture persists, it will. And so, like I told you about, when on the day that the Me Too hashtag went viral, I had a couple of my guy friends, like, on Facebook say, like, I'm so shocked and appalled at how many of the people I love are saying Me Too. And I'm just like, really? Really? You're shocked and appalled? You didn't know? Like, come on. Not a single woman was shocked or appalled. Or they were appalled, obviously, but they weren't shocked at the number, because they're like, oh no, it's just our reality. It's what we live with every single day, and that is a problem.
Yeah,
that shouldn't just be my life. That's like, oh yeah, shit, all this stuff that happens to me all the time, like, that's not cool. And oh yeah, I should have been speaking out about it from day one, but like, from the day you turn, the day you start going through puberty, it's like, oh shit, it's like happening to you all the time, and it just becomes normal. It becomes part of your normal life, and like, I don't want that for my daughters. I don't want that for my granddaughters. So.
And if you are someone who is suddenly shocked and appalled and never thought it was possible, it makes you the equivalent of the people who said, "Oh well, the guy seemed like a nice person. I never thought he was a serial killer." Like. Yeah. They don't have to be a cartoon villain twirling a mustache for there to be an issue. It could be someone who otherwise you think is a very good person, but these issues can still be there. And it doesn't have to just be a malicious act. A lot of the stuff on the grander scale is stuff that's been put into us through our culture and through growing up. And the second you are able to take a step out of yourself and accept that there might be a problem there, and not just feel defensive because someone is questioning a part of you that hurts them, then I think that's an important step everyone needs to take, not just on this issue, but in any issue. Like, we need to be willing to accept not just the problems in our society, but in ourselves, and work to change that. Because, I mean, I was a middle school boy. I know all the stuff I heard. I know some of the stuff I've said, like,
oh yeah,
and a lot of it you say because it's what you see as what's supposed to be further down the line, and you just kind of take it on.
Yeah, I think that's such a good example, middle school boy. Like, that's when when the media, that media influence of, like, the portrayal of women in media is so affecting, because you haven't had that life experience yet, and you're just, like, so flooded with hormones, and you're just being inundated with these messages from the media, and you haven't had, like, the growth experiences to decipher the right and wrongness of it yet so much. And so you're just like, because middle school boys are the worst. I remember being in middle school, and God, it's so annoying. Right. You shudder thinking about, like, exactly.
Some of the stuff I remember, but
yeah, totally.
Also, just because you first acknowledge it and you make that first change doesn't mean you might have to change down the line. Like, it has been for myself personally, going from middle school to high school, and, like, kind of, like, it's always been there, but the only reason that's the case for me is because, like, the only major figure in my life growing up was my mom. So, and that's very different from, and, like, my dad was around, but he made sure he wasn't a positive influence, and that kind of is a big impact on how you sway with that. But also that, looking back, even at me in high school, when I thought I understood and was talking about it correctly. Like, it's a long, arduous journey, and you have to be willing to take it and realize that, like, you will always constantly be trying to be better and trying to evolve, and you need to not just reach a point where, like, all right, I've addressed it as an issue, it's done.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, we had a movement, civil rights is solved. Like, no, it's a longer game than that. Like, you really have to put in the hours.
Yeah, these issues are so deep set into our society and our culture. It's a really gonna be very arduous process to like dig them out, and it'll never be completely over, you know. But it gets better and better.
Yeah, maybe when we've all evolved into some like weird amorphous new creature,
Just
we can
life
find.
forms.
Yeah, maybe then it will be fully like done, but. Or when we accept that we can just become conscious AIs and
Yeah, there you go.
yeah, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, we'll just become asexual beings.
Yeah, like
around.
balls of light and energy.
Done.
Like, but then your ball of light's not as shiny as my ball of light.
Oh shit!
Yeah,
It's a whole new set of issues.
All right. Well, hopefully that last bit of humor will help cleanse the palate a little bit and help you kind of breathe. I think that will be it for the discussion today. It's big enough of an issue, and there are other issues like this may come into another part later when new stuff comes out or new things when we talked about addressing other aspects of it, not just in gender but in race and just on the whole. Because let's be real, there's sexism, there's racism. There's also a classism issue that kind of helps stem a lot of the other ones and is used there. Yeah. It's a big obstacle to face, and it's more of a course than it is a singular wall.
Yeah.
So
it's just interesting to talk about it and really, like you said, keep the conversation going and encourage other people to talk about it too, because you know we're just having a conversation in your living room and for our YouTube channel, like that's important.
Yeah.
And other people who think, oh, like I'm just a person living in this random city with like post your own conversation, because everyone's voice is important. And
even if you're not posting the conversation, still have the conversation. I mean,
yeah.
Yes, it's a bit of an uncomfortable thing to talk about, but as long as you and the other person are on the same page, even if you're not, as long as you can be respectful enough to have the conversation,
yes.
Then you'll make headway. And one, the uncomfortable aspect won't be the conversation. It'll be the thing that you're trying to resolve.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important. Don't get so caught up in like, oh, it's really hard to talk about this with someone, because then you don't talk about it, and then it just stays bottled up inside.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone's bottled up their emotions inside, you know that eventually it will burst out in the worst way possible. And I think that's the case for a lot of our issues here in America.
Yeah.
We had civil wars and stuff. Like, it happens.
Yeah. Yep.
All right.
Respect.
Yeah.
Respect.
All right. For real this time, we'll end in the conversation.
But, no, I'm just kidding.
And we can go 3 hours if we need to. I'll cut it into parts, but
okay.
All right. So thank you for joining us. Hopefully you'll come back. Hopefully there won't be too many of you in the comments saying
voice your
things.
opinion, but remember, respect.
Well,
be respectful.
You have the right to your opinion.
Yeah, of course.
I have the right to think your opinion is trash and awful if it's really disgusting.
Because that's my opinion.
Yeah.
Your opinion.
Yeah.
But
right.
Yes, everyone has a right to their opinion, but I do think we should be respectful of each other at all times. And I love hearing people's opposing opinions, as long as they're not standing there screaming rude things at me.
Yeah, because then it's no longer a stance or an opinion. It's
then
just,
I blow you off, then I don't listen to your opinion.
Yeah, if you want someone to listen, talk about it calmly, respectfully, and use some real facts and not just some slurs. That's usually helpful.
Usually.
Just take a debate class. Like, apply that to actual things. Okay. Thank you. We'll see you next time.
For real now, bye.
For real. Okay.